Hi friends, this is Danielle from Sibylslab of Cartomantics. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a video. The Mister is out of town and I'm having what I'm calling a girls' weekend, which is really only me and my female dog being the girls and us supervising our poorly behaved little dog, her little brother. But it's me, mimosas, Cardi B, and some tarot decks. And I realized that with him out of the house and, no self-consciousness about what I see on my cards, that I would probably be using some decks that I don't typically use. And I thought, like, what if I understood my decks through the lens of girls' weekend decks? So I have some weekend decks that I'm understanding as my girls' weekend decks that I wanted to share with you. And I don't know, we'll sort of reflect on what I mean by that. I know what decks they are. I don't have defined criteria, but maybe I will become clearer about that as I share them with you, and we'll see what we all think. So there are 4 of these decks, and I'm going to share, as I share the decks and talk a little bit about them, I'll explain the relationship I have to them so far, what I anticipate doing with them. So let's see how this all shakes out. The first of these decks, this is the Otto Schmidt Tarot. This is the back of it. This deck is trimmed, and it's in order. So I'll show the images as I talk about it. This has a very Abigail Larson style, I think. So Abigail Larson, who did Darkwood Tarot and Horror Tarot, kind of Disney illustrative style. I may skip some cards that show nudity, and this deck list is probably unsurprisingly going to have some nudity. We're talking deeply feminine, embodied decks. So we are going to be seeing a fair amount of the female form, the shameless female form. This deck, I trimmed it because it is pretty Rider-Waite-Smith loyal, and I didn't need the titles, and they're pretty big cards. So it made sense to me to make them sort of more handy for my medium to small size hands. I love the mood of this deck. It is a little snarky, a little sharp, and that one's a skip. Pretty, how would I put it? Pretty unrestrained in its embrace of messages. The courts are Princess, Knight, Queen, and King. And you'll notice that all of the decks I'm choosing are not just girls' weekend decks because of the color palette, because I like them, although I could choose that. But these are decks that are deeply feminine in some way, that are deeply feminine coded, that are that in my practice, occupy that space in my practice. I am sometimes a girly girl, sometimes I'm dark and moody, but we're in pink, we're wearing our red glasses, and we have girly decks and mimosas and Cardi B. So let's see what we can get up to. As for this deck, I would say that I really enjoy the art, and I enjoy its take on the Rider-Waite-Smith, its loyalty to the tradition without its need to fixate on the formalities of those structured archetypes. So if you know the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, you can jump right into this deck, but it doesn't replicate. It's not what some people call an RWS knockoff or something. It is its own creature. And in that way, it's really helpful that I can pick it up, jump right in with it, and work with it without too much struggle or adjustment. Its symbolic language is clear. It is kind of amorphously medieval in a way that I like. I like its color language. I like the illustrative style. I've talked about this deck before as deeply reflective of the male gaze in some ways. Otto Schmidt is I think a comic book illustrator, and I think that this deck and its approach to the female form in some way reflects that. And I used to resist that. Like, I used to really have a discomfort with what felt like an overly, I mean, look at this. She's lusty, that Nine of Cups. I used to not enjoy what felt like a little bit of an indulgent engagement with the female form rather than an empowered and intentional sort of body of images that was for me to use rather than for someone to look at and objectify. I no longer feel that way in a lot of ways, and I've spoken about this before. My resistance to certain kinds of tarot imagery has changed. I think some of that is the result of having successfully worked with some of the issues that made me defensive or reactive to the presence or absence of certain kind of imagery. I can accept, we're gonna skip that one. I can accept the art on its own terms. I know what I'm getting with this deck. I know that it is not realism. I know that it is an art style that is going to engage with human forms in a way that is idealized and maybe makes the feminine form hyper visible gratuitously at times, but that's okay. And here's what I will say about this deck. The facial expressions, its emotive representations are so good. Like, there is so much. If I can complain about stuff that we find in the imagery, I can't complain about the way that the energy and meaning of a card is reflected in the figures themselves. Like, look at the facial expression of that magician. Look at the facial expression of this papess. Like, the art does the heavy lifting of meaning in a way that I think is really powerful, and is probably, to me, the most important thing about a deck. I want the art in a deck to bear the burden of conferring meaning outside of just what I know a card to mean. So I think that this deck does that really well, and I like that. So along with all of the other decks, this deck I'll have in the video description, whether it's still in print. I believe it is. The last I checked it was, but we'll see. The link will be there if it is. This deck, and the rest of them are out of order. This is the Mattison Tarot. The last I heard, this was still in print. This is the second edition of the deck, and it too is trimmed. It too is a big lady, and it too is named for its artist, who is a graphic designer and a poster artist, and we see that design style reflected in the art of the card. But let's go ahead and show some of these cards, and a reminder that it is trimmed. And as you see, it too is really reflective of the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition, but I want you to pay attention to the majors because they really deviate. It's clear what cards they're supposed to be, and the Roman numerals are still there. For the minors, as a quick note, all of the suits have a bar at the top that indicates what suit that is. So we see the cups here. This is the Six of Cups, but even if we weren't clear immediately what suit it was, that is the border, the top border of all of the cups cards. And if we look closely, we see a fish, we see a heart, we see a sea, an ocean in the middle circle. So it's pretty clear if you look at, and I like the symbolic language that's sort of small and detailed there. So this is the 3. There's a nice cross section of the human form, the woman, you know, the female form. This is the Judgment card. So this is one of the majors that is doing its own thing. This is a mood. This is really a mood. I don't love this card. I don't need the Judgment card to be a certain thing. That's a card that a lot of tarot decks manage in a lot of interesting ways. And in fact, I would say a lot of tarot decks, I've read before that like a tarot deck is the autobiography of its creator. I would say you can actually, I don't know that that's true in general, but you can tell a lot about a creator's tarot-based point of view on the basis of the way that they draw something like the Hierophant card, the Judgment card, these sort of troubled archetypes for a lot of people who engage with tarot, the ones that tend to be deeply Christianized and reflective of like the old Italian Catholic tradition. So this one is pretty dour, not loving it, but that happens. Here is the, and there are going to be ones that I skip in this deck too because there's some nudity, but this is the World card. Here is the Fool. Not my favorite, but she is young and energetic and on a journey, and we can accept that. Our 5 of Pentacles. I have used this deck a fair amount, and this is the 2nd edition. I do have the 1st edition. This deck was out of print. This is the Hierophant. It was out of print for a fair amount of time, and you can really see the Taurus reflected here. And then she printed a 2nd edition that I was glad to see made it available again. And so the last I heard, it is still in print, but I will include that information below. As you see on the minors, aside from the top bar, all of the minors have the 3 related astrological symbols for that suit. So I mean that swords all have the 3 zodiac glyphs, zodiac signs on all of the cards. So you'll see on her body, we have Libra on one arm, a Gemini on the other arm, and Aquarius on her torso. In traditional Golden Dawn, whatever, there's my ill-mannered female dog. In traditional Golden Dawn correspondences, this card is the 9 of Swords, which would be Mars in Gemini. Caitlin Mattison doesn't care about that so much. She is really invested in showing all 3 of the zodiac signs for that particular element in each of the cards. I'm interested in that. I'm fascinated by that. We're going to skip that one. And I'm not sure what that's about. The little guidebook that comes with it isn't really a guidebook. It's a big piece of paper. Here is the Chariot. Please don't mind these ill-mannered dogs. I'm not going to yell at her because it's girls' weekend, but still. He is so ill-mannered. I think it might be the mailman. Exposed parts because I love this image so much. But this is the 6 of Swords. Here we have the beautiful white woman in the boat holding her beautiful brown infant. There is a picture. I posted this image once with a picture of my own white mother holding me, the little brown baby. It reminds me of that picture so much. I have such a warm relationship with that card. I love it. It's so sweet. You do not often see interracial families represented in a certain kind of way, so that warms my heart and is nice to see. This is an interesting. I am not, I don't feel like the minors are as dynamic as the majors. I don't think that's like really that odd to say or that controversial if you look at the art, right? This is, as the Seven of Swords, a very unique take on the Seven of Swords. Like, I've never seen it represented this way, although it gets the same kind of traditional message across. But that said, there's not a lot of meat in those images to match the depth of symbolic representation in the majors. For example, here we have that death card that I love. This Kali image is so amazing. So amazing. So full. So like visually dynamic and confronting and, you know, captures the imagination and is provocative and all of it. So we have this, and then next to it we have this Two of Pentacles. Absolutely does the work. Beautiful. I mean, the Caitlin Madison's of that has her sort of showing like beautiful women wearing interesting things and like not traditional beauty, but like here's a cool outfit. Here's something hip. Here are women with attitude, different ages, different sizes, different races. You really see that represented in the images, and I appreciate that and enjoy that. But this Four of Wands just doesn't stand up to what I find in that like amazing death card. And I almost am distracted by the ill-matched nature of the imagery. In this Two of Swords, like all of that white space, that next to the death card in a spread is a little distracting to me, actually. I really enjoy this Four of Cups, and I think she's covered enough to share the image. I feel very seen in that image. All of that, those complicated feelings aside. So that is, I would say, that is why I've had a less than enthusiastic relationship to this deck over time. I really love it. I think it's interesting and unique. Nothing quite like it. I enjoy supporting and engaging with non-traditional tarot art, by which I mean like non-mass market, like just cool creations that I don't think are appreciated or known enough. It's not just like, ooh, I'm the cool girl, this is niche, but like, wow, it's really a treat to engage with these works of art that are not so well known. Look at this Lover's card. And this Justice, you guys, like some of these images, I see them. This is great for girls' weekend. Me, a glass of wine in this deck, I think we may come to an accord. But look at this Justice. I'm a Libra sun, and this Justice makes me so happy to be a Libra. So we're going to skip that one. Lovely Seven of Cups. Yeah, I think at this point I'm kind of repeating myself. I'm not sure, what would I say about this otherwise? It is a deck that I've used to read for myself to different degrees of success. I don't know how this would work as like, what if this was my working deck in a market or like for a day of reading for others? It is definitely a feminine and femme encoded deck. I don't know if the lack of visibility of male figures would be distracting or off-putting to male querents. Where there are men present, like look at this amazing King of Cups. There's something cool there, right? Like they are not dismissively treated in the art, but they're not deeply engaged. They are largely absent, and she doesn't need to have a lot of men in her deck if she doesn't want to. Lord knows that there are enough decks that have a kind of indifference to other kinds of gender representations. So a creator should make the deck that they want to make. And I think she successfully made the deck that she intended to make. That said, of course, her deck is going to be best suited for certain kinds of work. And I don't know that if I only had one deck to read for myself and others of all genders, that this would be that right deck. I don't know. It's weird to think that. It's not going to happen, right? Like, there's not going to be some apocalypse, as much as we all talk about that on Tarot too, because it's fun to think, like, what if there were only 5 decks? What if there's only one deck? Like, fun thought exercise, but not anytime soon. That said, you know, part of what I'm saying with my Girls Weekend decks here, I love this Queen of Cups, is me discovering in a different setting and context over like cocktails what these decks can do that I maybe didn't know they could do, or can investigate and explore a little bit more. That's something I want to investigate. Like, how much can that deck do that I maybe haven't asked it to do? Or, yeah, there's some work there. This is definitely an out-of-print deck. This is the Nosotras Tarot. This is by the same creators who do End of the World Tarot for Broken Hearts. I've shown that deck. I showed that deck in a video about Pips with Feelings. So the artist is Alyssa Reamer, amazing artist. Nosotras meaning our tarot. She's a Brazilian artist, and there's some I'm gonna need to, it's a collage deck. I'm going to need to hide from the eye because there's a fair amount of, I think, non-gratuitous nudity, but there is an absolute shameless embrace of the female form in a way that is really, I think, empowering. As for my relationship with this deck, I have mentioned a little bit about my background before. So I was born on an island in, the Azores, Portugal. So I have a kind of interesting relationship, like a nostalgic relationship to island and to that imagery. Like, I'll just say to that imagery. And my father's from the South Caribbean, and I lived there for a short time and got to know that family. We will see here, and let's look at the back of these cards. This is very clearly like a fertility totem for womanhood. We have at the very top there, the uterus symbol with Earth in the middle of sun and moon. At the end of each of the fallopian tubes, we are this is our tarot. This is about embodied womanhood. And look at this 3 of Cups in the form of the uterus. Love it. Love it. But we're going to skip that one. This is a lovely 6 of Cups. Something that was really impactful to me when I was living in Trinidad was the kind of demographic diversity that I didn't understand in the American context. Everyone was understood as Trinidadian, regardless of a really cross section of heritage, brown skin, white skin, red, yellow. Racial designations existed in a way that I didn't quite understand and is very foreign to the American context. I was much younger then, and have done a lot of studying, research, scholarly stuff, and just family stuff since then. So I have a different, probably more sophisticated, it would be fair to say, understanding of that history, that sort of ethnic historical account of how those social dynamics work. All of that fancy thinking aside, it was so cool to be me and understand my identity in the context of that very different kind of place, that I had a very different um, relationship to, like a very different heritage relationship to. And I had yet to find a deck that showed that region of the world and that demographic diversity, especially of womanhood, in a way that felt familiar on the basis of that experience. So, absolutely, there are lots of decks that, this Nine of Swords is everything. Lots of decks that show all kinds of bodies and all kinds of skins and whatever, and all kinds of regions, and the Afro-Brazilian tarot and the whole, like lots of stuff. There's a Caribbean deck that really is like mostly Puerto Rican, but has lots of folks and lots of different cultural subgroups represented. So it's not like I would suggest that there was an invisibility and like, oh yay. Trinidad is not Brazil. However, the portrait of cultural womanhood and its cross-section and its cobbled together, collaged, cross-historical, ahistorical, like it's so, look at this, right? Like one of the first experiences I had when I first went to Trinidad was in San Juan, and I went to a Chinese restaurant. I'm like sort of embarrassed to say this. The first time when I was much younger, in my like late teens, early 20s, and would go to different countries and didn't quite know the language, like we're talking Europe too, whatever. I always found my way to a Chinese restaurant because I didn't know if I would like the food native to that region, but I always knew what I would like at a Chinese restaurant. It's so embarrassing. I grew up, guys, but that's my like, if we're going to be honest. And for all of my Trinidadian upbringing, I don't like spicy food. So I'm new to Trinidad and I need to find a place to eat. We're going to go to this Chinese restaurant. And I met the owners, small place, just chit-chatting. They were two ethnically Chinese people who had Caribbean accents because they were born and raised in Trinidad. Tell me why my stupid 20-year-old self was like mind blown. I don't know if it didn't occur to me. I knew Afro-Trinidadians and Indo-Trinidadians, like South Indians, who were born and raised in Trinidad from the community that my father sort of fostered here, that I was connected to and grew up in. But I was there and like woke up to the reality like, oh, there aren't as many, but there are like white folks over here with their Trinidadian accents and their upbringing and their like sort of deep connection to the culture. And there are East Asians here with a deep connection to, like, it was so not racially coded in a way that it is here, right? Own set of problems, but a different set of problems and a different account of difference and power and all this stuff. So outside of just being like, whoa, the world is not like what I understand to be intercultural and like racial dynamics in the United States. That's not like just the way it is in the world. It was just like, oh, this is the way that a native culture can look. It's not as if I met these folks and they were like, no, we're not Trinidadian. We're Chinese. Like, no, they're just Trinidadian. Like, they are just like everybody else is over here. And that is the palette that represents Trinidad. I have yet to find a Trini deck, right? But this Brazilian deck is not Afro-Brazilian. It's not like, it is everything. It is like all of the stuff, all of the problems and all of the beauty and all of the richness and whatever. It is not just idyllic. in these other places, let me tell you, right? Like the history that brought like all of these different kinds of skins and faces and cultures and whatever to these regions is not a beautiful one. So it'd be absurd to say like, what a beautiful place and nothing is messy here. But it is a different way of feeling seen. If you look like me and have my background and are getting to know part of your like sort of story, your ancestral story, it was so powerful. And all of that goes to say, all of this babbling goes to say, when I got this deck, which I found, I don't even know how I found this deck, in the way that I find decks that are like indie creators who have beautiful things online and sort of are under discussed and look intriguing to me. I found it and ordered it, and it took a really long time to get here, and I had to like, use the website while it was in Portuguese and stuff. But I finally made it here years and years ago. And what was I saying? I expected a beautiful collage deck from a different place that was captivating. Oh. We're gonna go through that one. That was the female form. But I felt there was something so home about this, in the way that like Trinidad was a kind of ancestral home that felt like, oh, this is a certain kind of home that I didn't know I had. This deck rendered that account of like home in a way that I had not found visually elsewhere. And it just feels so, I treasure it for that reason. I definitely wouldn't, this deck I've only used to read for myself, actually. Probably for that reason. And that's perfectly fine. Me, like, her and I are going to have a good time for Girls Weekend. And I know that. This is less about investigation and more about just, look at this beautiful little girl. I may eat children. I wouldn't eat her. But, like, me and Nosotras, we're going to have a lot of fun. If the other one, I think that Otto Schmidt is going to be playful and just delightful and snarky. I think Caitlin Mattison is going to be a little investigative, and me experimenting and testing her. Me and Nosotras, we're just going to like remember together and think about the past and think about like dig into who I am. There's something kind of celebratory and enjoyable and deep about not just my relationship to that captured history. It's visuals, it's cultural home, but like that aesthetic, the story behind it, the little white book that comes with it explains a little bit about the political history of when the deck was made and why the deck was made and how it was made as a kind of active resistance to the political regime of its moment. So I'm going to wrap up. This one is a very different kind of Girls Weekend deck. In fact, I think that like she would backhand me for calling her a Girls Weekend deck. This is the Barbara Walker Tarot. This deck is only in print as here's the tin, as a tin-sized deck now. It's very much in print. I did trim the sides because the art is small and it had a lot of borders for no reason. As you will see, the deck, its minors have titles, its courts have mythologically named gods and goddesses, and what I say, it is dark in a way that is not like, ooh, spooky. I'll say this, it slants to shadow. Here's what I mean. This is the Eight of Wands. The Eight of Wands is typically Lord of Swiftness. It's quickness, it's communication, very mercurial, very active, very... This version of the Eight of Wands is about all of that swiftness, all of that quickness, but to the point of hubris. Like it's fall because you were foolish enough to be so swift that you moved too quickly and you fell off of Pegasus. The imagery doesn't tell us like that could be the shadowed reading. The title insists on that shadowed reading. She feels like Barbara is going to come in when I've had one too many, glasses of red wine. And I'm done with my playing, and I'm done with my little experimenting with Caitlin Mattison, and I've had my fun with Nosotras, and she's gonna read me. Like, this is the crone who has no F's to give. Seven of Swords opposition. Like, there's something... This, I would say, is the absolute least of the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition of these decks. I know a fair amount about mythology. A lot of these mythological figures are unfamiliar to me. I am going to have to skip a few of the images. But as you can see, like the color palette, if we leave off the titles, so for a moment, forget that this is Avarice, this Four of Pentacles. In traditional Golden Dawn, the title of this card is Lord of Earthly Power. Crowley calls this just power. It makes sense that the construction of power in the imagery in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck often gets kind of perceived as greed, because power to its gravest degree can become that. It's a kind of like collection of resources and an interest in power to its corruption. But it could just be power. Like, it could just be, isn't it good to be powerful? It could just be that force, stability, emperor in the minors, like you building a fortress that you need. But no, in Barbara Walker, it has to be avarice. That is a choice. This deck, I struggle with the most out of these four that I'm sharing. I struggle with its temperament, like its absolute shadow. I struggle with my resistance to the art style. With what it does with the body. With a little bit with its engagement with gender. Like, as you'll see, there are a fair number of images of male suffering and sacrifice of males. And I'm not saying like Barbara Walker, some let's make men suffer deck creator, but I am saying that her approach to fall is to have a nude figure on Pegasus falling off because of his hubris. The image of loss is a satyr sitting under the tree and having lost, losing emotionally, that active grief. Like, there are other images, as you'll see. So here's the Nine of Swords cruelty. This is not a male figure, but it's like, looks like an evil coven with an evil tree. Like, yikes. The Nine of Swords is cruelty and ruin. It's dark. It's the nightmare card. But this is brutal. I mean, it's a lot. We have yet to come to an accord. I have yet to figure out how to work with this deck. I've been doing some work with Baba Yaga recently. And in some ways, it has felt like this would be a good deck for working with her. Like, this would be a crone's voice in a way that is, like, sharp and cruel. And she's sharp-tongued and impatient. She is uncompromising and weaponizes her words, among other things. But there's so much tension between me and the art here that I have trouble even engaging with it. And I want to talk to Bubby Yaga, even if she's going to tell me about myself. Like, I want to hear the crone, but I have such a struggle. Look at this Prince of Pentacles, this Merlin. Like, what is this demon outside of the window? Yikes. It's so weird. I like its oddity. Like, I like the weird and the unusual and a provocation to what we expect about tarot. And it's representation of ritual. Like this Eight of Pentacles learning. I love that. But like, look at this Six of Pentacles charity. Its depiction of power, like the kind of grotesque, puny man appealing to a woman of leisure who looks a little manipulative. Like it's not, charity is like a better word than cruelty or loss. And yet this image is still, I don't like it. Like I don't like it at all. This Princess of Pentacles Nimue, like, yikes. I don't know. I don't know, people. I actually would love to hear people in the comments tell me what is your relationship to this deck or what is your reaction to it, because I'm really struggling. I'm not going to spend too much time with her this weekend because I want to fun. I mean, we're doing like mimosas and Cardi B, right? This is not going to be Bobby Yaga come for me weekend. I'm just trying to learn how to even talk to her. And maybe I'm thinking that the fun and rapport I'll experience with these other decks is going to make it feel more safe to try to open up to this deck in a way that I haven't yet. I think maybe I have the Ace of Swords doom. Like I have some kind of anxiety with this deck. I want to talk to her in theory, but I'm just uncomfortable in practice. This is a terrifying image of childhood. This is the Five of Swords, the sacrifice of the man on the tree. Like, don't love that. I don't love that. And it's not because I'm like, I mean, let's sacrifice a man here and a woman there and let's get dark. Let's get provocative and whatever. But I don't know. There's something. And I will also say this about Barbara Walker, and I accept the idiosyncrasies of this deck for what it is. Like, it is very much the creation of a woman who is invested in a mythologized supported story of feminism. So what I mean by that is she includes in her guidebook a lot of explanations for the mythological associations that comprise the cards, or explain the histories of who we find in, like, here are the three fates. This one's not too hard, right? But that Eight of Cups, the lost that has the satyr under the tree, I'm pretty sure in the guidebook she has some description of the connection to the actual mythological story she means to represent in that image. But in the little white book, which is pretty descriptive, like it's a pretty rich little white book, in the little white book, she'll start with that and then explain how, like, actually that's related to this previous piece of mythology, and actually, like, it's connected to 3 other stories. Now, like, mythology does work that way. There is syncretism. So there is a way that, like, one thing transforms into another thing, that, like, you know, Astara and Easter, even though, like, Christianity and the wheel of the whatever engage with and evolve from one another, right? Like, so it's not, that mythology doesn't have to do with this mythology, Barbara Walker. How could you say that? It is, like, kind of, you made that up. So not that it's always made up, like, when people explain syncretism. And there are interesting instances of syncretism that she does describe in the little white book. And I am not an expert of mythology, right? Like, I'm a scholar who knows a lot about mythology, but that is not my field. So it is maybe unfair for me to say that I know enough to call out this woman who has made part of her career about the story of women in power and mythology and history and narrative, right? She knows lots of stuff I don't know. Some of the stuff that she says she knows, I find implausible or untrue on the basis of what I have read and trust. So people smarter than me who I've read, right? Not me and what I know, but people who are really smart and who I've read and have footnotes, explain things in a way that would imply that some of the connections she explains, like the actually Pegasus, who is the child of Medusa, and that's true, Pegasus springs from the body of Medusa, is connected to, like, this Assyrian goddess, which goes back to, like, I don't remember what her account of Pegasus is, so it may not be, that may be a bad example. But there are a number of those moments that are, that feel ahistorical and unsupported to me, that sound really good. So there's no, in my mind, there's like, I'm willing to co-sign, that's a fun story. And it's fun to believe some of the stuff that she claims. And I don't think, no one's like quoting this in their college paper, hopefully. So there's no real expense to suspending disbelief and going on the journey that she's going on, saying, like, you know, this is actually connected to that, which we find in prehistory and whatever. If it's not true by the archive, it's fun to imagine and to think about. So I can do that. But I would prefer that if we're doing that to say, wouldn't it be cool if? Or as a person who's not really sure, I see these connections. Like I see resonances between what we find in this story and in that story. I don't know if they're connected, but I do think, and this is true, right? Like if you see a symbol or an archetype in 2 cultures across millennia, they may not be connected, but they are satisfying a distinct need of their moment. It is interesting to consider what it is that archetype is doing in each of those separate cultural contexts, and what we can learn about the fact that they exist separately, and then entertain the idea that, like, are they connected? And, like, how might they be connected? And is there a spiritual way they're connected, or is there actual documented proof of their connection? The implication seems to be, in some of her work, that there is documented proof of connections that there are not, I would argue, documented proof for. So I have to say, and I don't think that is unfair hubris on my part. I don't think I'm being unfair to say that, whereas I would normally be happy to suspend disbelief, that the claim, the factual claim that feels unsupported and overly confident is distracting. Like, I don't know. I am quite aware of when I'm being a know-it-all and willing to accept, like, come on, calm down, right? Like, and I don't know everything. But I do think I know enough in this instance, and I don't think it's unfair to be distracted by some of these claims. And in the absence of proof, or in the presence of absolute counterfactual, like cultural history. So aside from being really mean, like Barbara Walker Tarot just feels mean, you guys. Aside from being really mean, and needing the guidebook, I actually, part of this is, right, that I feel like I need the guidebook. That this isn't just, I can look at the image. I need to understand, is there any way to read that Eight of Cups in light? Like, if it's loss, period, what is it in shadow? Is it just a card that's always in shadow? Is the entire deck in shadow? Like, what do I do with that? And so for that reason, because they're so, like, it pushes so much, her approach to the archetypes is really, she's a very strong point of view that I think it's important to understand for me to work with the deck confidently. Whereas with, for example, Otto Schmidt Tarot, I got it. Like, Caitlin Mattison, we're good. Nosotras has a really fun little white book, but I don't need it. It's fun to engage with, to see what the artist has to say about those choices. Definitely don't need it. Barbara Walker, I need that little white book, and it's kind of cool that the little white book does so much heavy lifting. But because I need that little white book so much, what I find there, I'm inclined to be hypercritical about, because I feel like I have to trust the little white book a lot to understand a very strong point of view. And I struggle with trusting, like, I think with a deck this powerful and assertive, you really do need to trust your deck creator. And that little white book and some of its cultural historical claims tests me. All of that aside, I chose this deck, and I'm choosing to work with this deck. Nobody's like holding a gun to my head to work with this deck. So I'm not that person who is going to like problematize the deck. If I don't like it, I just won't work with it. I'm not like canceling anyone or holding anyone overly accountable or something. It is a tarot deck. This is less about my critique of the deck and more an explanation for my struggle with the deck so far, and why, like, this is going to occupy a very particular kind of space in my girls' weekend. This is going to be the trial. Like, I don't know if this means I'm going to, like, only approach her after I've had 5 glasses of wine, or when I'm stone cold sober, because, like, it's just going to be trouble if I've had 5 glasses of wine. We'll see. Maybe I'll report back. Or maybe I'll do a blog post on Barbara Walker Tarot. It feels like it merits its own blog post. I don't think I've done a post on the blog yet that's just like one deck and me talking about that deck and engaging with it. But this merits, like, an exploration in writing, because the account of the deck and its creation and its point of view is so rooted in a story of feminist history. So I hope that, like, this has been fun to think about, even if you're not doing girls' weekend because you're not a girl or you don't have your own weekend to do whatever. It's interesting, I think, to consider when no one is around. If you have roommates or partners but you're in an empty house and you have a weekend or a set amount of time that's just like you doing something like, what am I trying to say? Like leisure, like a couple days of tarot vacation. What is it that you get up to? Because I'm not saying I'm going to work with these decks for the next month or whatever. This is a little tarot vacation. Mine happens to be girls' weekend with wine and Cardi B, like Netflix and whatever. So this is like, it's so weird to think about packing Barbara Walker for my girls' weekend. All right, guys, to wrap up, we on this channel like to do a reading for the collective. Let's ask the cards what it is like next time we have the space to take an afternoon staycation, to like craft some defined amount of time, whether that's 2 hours or 2 days, and turn that time into like a reprieve with tarot. Like you and tarot are going to work differently together on this staycation or this vacation. What should you seek? I have decided to seek different accounts of womanhood and think about how they engage with like how I understand myself and how I understand the tarot. What should we all look for next time? That's true for us. Because when I have these weekends to myself, I don't always do like girls' weekend with tarot. It just so happened. I don't know, I was wearing pink. It felt like the right time. I think I was somewhere and most of mixing things were available and it just felt very of the moment. I was like, let's get this started. Mimosa, brunch, girls' weekend, ill-mannered dogs. Let's have fun. All right, my first card is a jumper and it's the Hermit. We pull 2 cards on this channel because the magic happens between 2 cards. So this second card is going to be the Devil. We're using Barbara Walker Tarot, so let's see. The Hermit and the Devil. Like, I cannot figure out how to hold things on this screen. I think I'm a smart person and then I'm put in my place. All right, the Hermit and the Devil. You know, this one's pretty easy. Like, here's the thing. The Hermit is insisting that really we be rigid about our staycation, our vacation, or whatever, that we really set boundaries on that time. There's a way that you can like sort of kick people out of the room and isolate yourself, you know, in your space, in your tarot space, and decide to take an afternoon or a day and a half and just tell everyone, leave me alone. I'm going to do tarot stuff. This would suggest that like that's not enough. That you need to really build walls around your tarot staycation or vacation in a meaningful and intentional way that is uncompromising, that is not knocking on the door, hey mom, what's for lunch, but is like no one's crossing these boundaries. You need that kind of time. And the Devil is insisting that you just absolutely indulge. Like, it is your sweet tooth. It is telling you to like pursue your tarot sweet tooth. That deck that is ridiculous and silly that you wanted to play with. This is not a moment for edifying tarot study. It's not a moment for like changing your perception of personhood and like investigating the history of tarot in whatever way. And this is saying be totally indulgent. Indulge your sweet tooth, use the deck. Because remember, you're in a cave. No one's looking. No one's going to know if you're just playing with like your office themed tarot deck or like the labyrinth themed tarot deck or whatever. And what tea you bring with you, it is entirely your time. And I would even say that the Devil is telling you to like tell everyone when they ask that it's none of their business. This is you and your permission to be selfish. I've always viewed the Devil in light as being, selfish, being indulgent in your own self-interest. Sometimes we need to protect our self-interest, and sometimes we need to be materially oriented and shamelessly selfish. So be shamelessly selfish in your cave with your tarot cards and tell everyone else it's none of their damn business. All right, guys, it has been so fun. This is like a great little thing to do during my girls' weekend to kind of kick it off. Although I have had some mimosas already, and I have been listening to Cardi B in the car. And I am about to go take my dogs out again. But in the meantime, until next time, do check out the video description. There will be links to where you can purchase a reading and do some mentoring. I'd love to work with you on whatever kind of deck is sort of tickling your fancy at the moment, whatever's hitting your sweet tooth, or you want to be studying, or what work you feel like you need to be doing. But until next time, guys, I will see you in the lab. Bye.